The call that would change everything came at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night. Marcus Cole had every reason to ignore it. 3 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and humiliated by the woman whose name now flashed across his phone screen. 3 years of watching his ideas appear in other people's presentations, of being passed over for promotions he had earned twice over, of hearing the same coded phrases that meant the same ugly thing. Cultural fit. Not quite right for client-facing roles. Better suited for support positions. He knew what those words really meant. He had known since he was 12 years old, and a store clerk followed him through the aisles of a grocery store in suburban Chicago. The phone buzzed again, 5th time in 20 minutes. Marcus sat at the small kitchen table of his apartment, laptop open to the children's book he had been writing for 6 months. Starlight Lily, he called it. A story about a little girl who teaches a lost star how to find its way home. He had promised himself he would finish it before his daughter's 9th birthday, now just 7 weeks away. The $850 rent notice sat beside his coffee cup, already a week overdue. His bank account showed $62.47. The math of single parenthood never quite added up, no matter how many times he ran the numbers. Daddy, who keeps calling? Lily stood in the hallway, her favorite purple blanket draped over her shoulders like a cape. 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, her mother's eyes looking back at him with that same gentle curiosity Emily always had. Just work, sweetie. Nothing important. You should be asleep. I heard the phone. 5 times. Marcus smiled despite himself. She had inherited her mother's precision too. Emily had been a chemical engineer, the kind of woman who could calculate molecular bonds in her head while making pancakes on Sunday morning. Pancreatic cancer took her in 7 months. The medical bills took everything else. His startup, valued at $2.3 million the year before she got sick, sold for pennies to cover treatments that bought them weeks instead of years. His savings, his plans, his belief that the universe rewarded hard work and good intentions. Go back to bed, baby girl. I'll check on you in a minute. Lily lingered, studying him with an expression far too old for her face. Then she padded back to her room, blanket trailing behind her like the train of a royal gown. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text message. Please help. I'm in trouble. Marcus stared at those 4 words for a long moment. Victoria Ashford had never said please to him. Not once in 3 years. She had said insufficient and disappointing and not what I expected. She had said, we need someone who resonates with our client base while looking directly at the only black face in the conference room. She had denied his request to attend Lily's school recital last month because the quarterly report needed formatting changes that any intern could have handled. And yet, he thought about what Emily used to say when he came home frustrated, when the world seemed determined to remind him that certain doors would never fully open for men who looked like him. The measure of a person isn't how they treat those who can help them. It's how they treat those who can't. 30 minutes later, Marcus pulled up outside the Velvet Lounge, an upscale bar in the business district where Ashford and Associates closed deals with clients who spent more on a single bottle of wine than Marcus earned in a week. Through the window, he could see Victoria at the bar, arguing with the bartender, her posture nothing like the rigid perfection she maintained at the office. Mrs. Garcia, his 67-year-old neighbor who had become something like family since Emily's death, was watching Lily. She had asked no questions when Marcus called, just said she would be there in 5 minutes. That was the thing about struggle. It taught you to recognize it in others and to show up without being asked. Inside the Velvet Lounge, The scene was worse than Marcus had imagined. Victoria Ashford, the woman who terrorized junior executives and reduced seasoned marketers to stammering apologies, sat slumped on a bar stool with wine staining her silk blouse and mascara streaking down her face. Her usually immaculate hair had come loose from its severe bun, falling around her shoulders in a way that made her look almost human. "I'm perfectly capable of driving myself home. Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire block. Ma'am, I've called you a cab. I'm not giving you back your keys." Victoria spotted Marcus, and her expression shifted into something that might have been relief, though she would never admit it. "Marcus, tell this person who I am." The bartender raised his eyebrows, silently asking the question that Marcus had been asking himself since he got in the car. "Why are you here?" "She's my boss. I'll take her home." The bartender handed over Victoria's purse and car keys, with the weariness of someone who had seen this scenario play out 100 times. Good luck, man. What the bartender did not see, what Marcus himself did not notice, was the figure watching from across the street. Richard Townsend, CEO of Townsend Enterprises, their biggest client at $4.7 million annually, had just left a dinner meeting 2 blocks away. He had been considering pulling his account after Victoria's harsh treatment during their presentation earlier that week. Now he stood on the sidewalk, watching the agency's top employee help its intoxicated CEO into a battered Honda Civic. In the car, Victoria slumped against the passenger window, the fight draining out of her with each passing block. "Why are you helping me?" Her words came out soft, blurred at the edges. "I'm terrible to you." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "Because it's the right thing to do." "The right thing." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My mother used to say that. Before she trailed off, staring at something Marcus couldn't see. "She died 5 years ago. Today." The words hung in the car like smoke, suddenly explaining everything about this night. The drinking, the breakdown, the desperate text to the last person who should have answered. "I'm sorry. I lost my father when I was young. Those anniversaries never get easier." Victoria turned to look at him then. Really look at him, perhaps for the first time since he had started working at her company. The Ashford and Associates, 3rd generation. Her grandfather had started the firm in 1962, back when Madison Avenue was a different world entirely. Her father had built it into a regional powerhouse. Now she sat in its corner office, carrying a legacy she had never asked for and could never escape. Marcus helped her into her penthouse apartment, all chrome and white leather and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that sparkled with indifferent beauty. No photographs anywhere except one, magnetized to the refrigerator. Victoria, much younger, with an older woman who shared her high cheekbones and sharp jaw. Both of them smiling in a way Marcus had never seen his boss smile. "That's my mother." Victoria had appeared behind him, steadier now, but still fragile. "She taught me everything except how to live without her." Before Marcus could respond, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "It's Richard Townsend. Don't answer. Not in your condition." But she was already accepting the call, switching to a professional tone that barely masked the tremor underneath. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise." Marcus could hear the anger crackling through the phone. "Something about unprofessional behavior. Reconsidering our partnership. A witness outside the Velvet Lounge." Victoria's face crumbled as she realized what was happening. Her carefully constructed world collapsing because of one moment of human weakness. Marcus surprised himself by gently taking the phone from her hand. "Mr. Townsend, this is Marcus Cole. I apologize for the interruption, but Ms. Ashford has received devastating personal news this evening. The anniversary of her mother's passing. I'm ensuring she gets home safely. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting on Monday to discuss any concerns." A long pause. Then Richard Townsend's voice, noticeably softer. By the time Marcus hung up, he had not only smoothed things over, but secured a tentative agreement to discuss an expanded campaign. Victoria stared at him like he had just performed a miracle. "You saved my career. After everything I've done to you." Marcus shrugged. Everyone deserves a second chance. He helped her to her bedroom, left water and aspirin on the nightstand, and turned to leave. His daughter was waiting. His unfinished book was waiting. His life, small and difficult and infinitely precious, was waiting. "Your daughter." Victoria's voice came from behind him, already fading toward sleep. "Lily. The one whose recital I wouldn't let you attend." Marcus paused at the door. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." He didn't respond. Drunk apologies rarely survived the light of day. By Monday morning, Victoria Ashford would be the Dragon Lady again, and this night would become something neither of them mentioned. Or so he thought. What Marcus Cole didn't know, as he drove home through empty streets, was that Victoria Ashford lay awake in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, making a decision that would transform both their lives. What he didn't know was that somewhere in that penthouse, in a box she hadn't opened since her father's funeral 2 years ago, sat documents that would expose a legacy far darker than difficult management. And what he didn't know, as he checked on his sleeping daughter and kissed her forehead, was that the woman who had made his professional life miserable was about to become the catalyst for something none of them could have predicted. But first, she had to survive what waited for her on Monday morning. Monday morning arrived with the chaos that defined Marcus Cole's life. Spilled orange juice on Lily's science fair poster, a missing shoe that turned up in the refrigerator, placed there by an 8-year-old who had been half asleep while packing her lunch the night before. A frantic dash to catch the school bus that left both of them breathless and laughing on the sidewalk as it pulled away just in time. By the time Marcus walked into Ashford and Associates, he had already lived an entire day. He braced himself for what awaited him. Cold dismissal, most likely. Perhaps outright hostility. Victoria Ashford was not the kind of woman who acknowledged weakness, especially not to someone she had spent 3 years treating as invisible. What he did not expect was to find her standing beside his cubicle, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, Marcus." Black with 1 sugar, right? The office fell silent. Keyboards stopped clicking. Conversations died mid-sentence. In 3 years, Victoria Ashford had never once brought coffee to an employee. She had never remembered how anyone took their coffee. She had barely acknowledged that anyone in this building existed as a full human being with preferences and needs and lives outside these walls. Marcus accepted the cup with the caution of a man handling something that might explode. "Thank you. I'd like to speak with you in my office, when you have a moment." The whisper started before she had taken 3 steps. Marcus felt every eye in the room tracking him as he followed the woman who had earned her nickname through years of merciless criticism and impossible demands. Inside her office, Victoria closed the door and turned to face him. She looked different somehow. The same tailored suit, the same perfect posture, but something in her eyes had shifted. A wall had come down, or at least developed a crack. I remember everything about Friday night. I want you to know that I'm not pretending it didn't happen." Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable with this unfamiliar version of his boss. "It's really not necessary to—" "It is necessary." Victoria cut him off, but without the sharp edge he had come to expect. "You helped me when you had every reason not to. You protected my reputation with Richard Townsend. You showed me kindness I did nothing to deserve." She moved to her desk and picked up a folder Marcus hadn't noticed before. "I spent the weekend going through personnel files, yours in particular. Northwestern MBA, CPA license earned at 26. A startup you built from nothing to 2.3 million valuation before you came here." Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that explaining his qualifications only made people more determined to overlook them. "I've been reviewing the last 3 years. The promotions I denied you, the projects I reassigned, the way I've allowed others to take credit for your work." She opened the folder and slid it across the desk toward him. "This is a promotion to Senior Creative Director, 40% salary increase, which brings you to $72,800 annually. Flexible working hours so you can be there for your daughter. Stock options representing 0.5% of company equity." Marcus stared at the paperwork. The numbers blurred as his mind struggled to process what was happening. "Why now?" "Because you showed me something I'd forgotten existed. Decency without strings attached." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Lily's school. His stomach dropped as he read the words. "Lily's sick. I need to go pick her up." In the past, this would have earned him a lecture about commitment and priorities. Instead, Victoria nodded. "Of course. Take the rest of the day. We can discuss the details tomorrow." Marcus paused at the door, still trying to reconcile this woman with the one who had denied him permission to attend his own daughter's recital 4 weeks ago. "I meant what I said, Marcus. Things are going to be different around here." Lily had a fever of 101.2 and a sore throat that made her wince every time she swallowed. Marcus bundled her into the car with her purple blanket and the stuffed elephant she had stopped carrying everywhere 2 years ago, but still reached for when she felt small and scared. That night, after the children's Tylenol and the chicken soup from a can and 3 chapters of Charlotte's Web read in the soft voice he reserved for sick days and thunderstorms, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and tried to make sense of what had happened. The promotion was real. He had read the paperwork twice. A 40% raise would change everything. The overdue rent notice would stop being a crisis. Lily's science fair supplies would stop being a budget negotiation. Maybe he could even start putting something away for her college fund, the one that had evaporated along with everything else when Emily got sick. But something about the speed of Victoria's transformation nagged at him. People didn't change overnight. Not really. Not the ones who had built their entire identities around being untouchable. He opened his browser and typed in the search he had started Friday night before the phone calls interrupted. Ashford and Associates employee reviews. Discrimination complaints Chicago. The results painted a picture he wished he could unsee. 47 complaints filed over 15 years. 0 resulted in action. 31 employees of color had left the company during that period, 23 citing cultural fit as the reason in their exit interviews. A pattern so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. One name jumped out at him. James Carter. Wrongful termination lawsuit filed in 2019, settled out of court with terms undisclosed. Marcus knew that name. James had been a deacon at Greater Hope Baptist, the church Emily had attended since childhood. He had sat 3 pews behind them at her funeral, had brought a casserole dish to the apartment afterward, had squeezed Marcus's shoulder, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. What had happened to James at Ashford and Associates, and why had he never mentioned it? Wednesday afternoon, Victoria called Marcus into her office for a different reason. Richard Townsend wants to have dinner with us. Friday evening. He was impressed by how you handled the situation last week, and he wants to discuss expanding his account. Marcus felt the familiar tension that came with being put on display. He had spent his career being the diversity in diversity initiatives, the proof that companies could point to when questions arose. But something about Victoria's tone suggested this was different. I should warn you, Richard can be direct. He'll ask about the incident at the bar. I'd prefer if we kept the details vague. I'm not going to lie for you. The words came out before Marcus could soften them. Victoria's expression flickered, something between surprise and respect. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to be discreet. There's a difference. Is there? The question hung between them, testing the boundaries of this new dynamic. Victoria was the first to look away. Fair enough. Tell him whatever you think is appropriate. I've spent 5 years trying to control how people see me. Maybe it's time to let the truth speak for itself. Thursday evening, Marcus was walking home from the corner store with milk and bread when a figure stepped out of the shadows near his building's entrance. His body tensed before his mind caught up, years of city living triggering reflexes he wished he didn't need. Marcus Cole, Emily's husband. The voice was familiar. Marcus squinted in the dim light of the street lamp and recognized the face. Older now, grayer, with a weariness that seemed bone deep. James, from Greater Hope. James Carter glanced around the street like a man who expected to find threats in every shadow. I heard you're working at Ashford now. Word travels in our community. I also heard you're getting close to the Dragon Lady. Marcus felt the weight of the grocery bag pulling at his arm. What happened to you there, James? The older man's jaw tightened. I found something. Evidence of systematic discrimination going back 15 years. Before Victoria even took over. Back when her father was running things. Her father? William Ashford. He built that company on a foundation of exclusion. Hiring practices designed to keep certain people in certain positions. Promotion criteria that somehow always favored the same demographic. When I tried to bring it to the board, I was terminated within a week, officially, for performance issues. But we both know what it really was. Marcus thought about the 47 complaints he had found online, the 31 employees who had left, the pattern that was too consistent to be coincidence. Why are you telling me this? Because I made the mistake of trying to fight alone. I had evidence, but no allies. No one willing to put their neck on the line. The settlement came with a non-disclosure agreement that keeps me from saying anything publicly, but nothing stops me from warning you about what you're walking into. James pressed a folded piece of paper into Marcus's hand. Sandra Martinez, HR director. She's been there 15 years. She knows where all the bodies are buried. If you want the truth about what that company really is, she's your best chance. Marcus looked down at the paper, then back up at James. But the older man was already walking away, disappearing into the night, like he had never been there at all. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus sat in the kitchen with the piece of paper and a decision he wasn't ready to make. The promotion sitting on Victoria's desk could change his daughter's life, Flexible hours meant being there for school plays and science fairs and all the moments he had been missing. A 40% raise meant stability, security, the kind of future he had stopped allowing himself to imagine. But James Carter's words echoed in his mind. Systematic discrimination. 15 years. Before Victoria even took over. If what James said was true, then Victoria's transformation wasn't redemption, it was renovation. A fresh coat of paint on a building with a rotten foundation. Marcus looked at the photograph of Emily on the bookshelf, the one from their wedding day where she was laughing at something he had whispered in her ear. She had always been the brave one, the one who spoke truth to power without flinching, who believed that silence in the face of injustice was its own kind of complicity. "What would you do?" he asked the photograph, but he already knew the answer. The best response to doubt is excellence, but the best response to injustice is truth. Tomorrow, he would find Sandra Martinez. Tomorrow, he would start asking questions that might cost him everything he had just been offered. But tonight, he had a daughter to check on and a story to finish writing about a little girl who taught a lost star how to shine again. Sandra Martinez agreed to meet him in the parking garage after hours. Her voice on the phone had carried the weight of someone who had been waiting years for this conversation. 15 years I've watched good people walk out that door. 15 years I've filed complaints that went nowhere. I kept telling myself I was protecting my family, my pension, my future, but some debts compound interest until you can't afford to pay them anymore. She handed Marcus a USB drive containing documentation that spanned William Ashford's entire tenure as CEO. Hiring records showing qualified candidates of color passed over for less experienced white applicants. Performance reviews with identical ratings resulting in vastly different outcomes depending on who was being evaluated. Exit interviews where the phrase cultural fit appeared like a recurring diagnosis for a disease no one wanted to name. 47 complaints, 31 terminations, and Victoria's signature on every HR decision for the past 5 years, continuing a pattern her father had established long before she took the corner office. Marcus spent 3 nights reviewing the files after Lily went to sleep. The numbers told a story that no amount of coffee apologies or promotion paperwork could erase. But the more he read, the more he noticed something else. Victoria's earliest decisions had mimicked her father's approach precisely, but over time, small deviations appeared. A hiring decision that went against the pattern. A promotion that shouldn't have happened according to the established criteria. Cracks in the foundation she had inherited. She doesn't know. The realization hit Marcus like cold water. She inherited a system and operated within it without ever examining what it was built on. The dinner with Richard Townsend went better than expected. Marcus presented a retention strategy based on the data analysis he had done on his own time, demonstrating expertise that 3 years of cubicle invisibility had hidden from everyone except Sandra Martinez and now Richard himself. By the end of the evening, Townsend had increased his contract commitment from $4.7 million to $6.2 million annually, contingent on Marcus leading the account personally. "You've been hiding this man in a back office for 3 years?" Townsend's voice carried genuine incredulity as he addressed Victoria. "That's either very poor management or very good luck that he stayed." Victoria's expression revealed nothing, but Marcus saw her hands tighten around her wine glass. Both, probably. The following Monday, Marcus made his decision. He brought the USB drive to Victoria's office and placed it on her desk. "Before you accept that promotion officially, you need to see this. What you do with it will determine whether I stay at this company or walk away from everything you've offered." Victoria's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and finally a guarded curiosity as she plugged in the drive and began reading. Marcus watched her expression transform over the next hour. First came denial, the slight shake of her head, the muttered protests that there must be some explanation. Then came recognition, the moment when patterns she had sensed but never examined suddenly became impossible to ignore. Finally came devastation, the slow collapse of a woman realizing that the legacy she had devoted her life to protecting was built on a foundation of calculated exclusion. "My father." Her voice emerged broken, barely audible. "He taught me everything about this business. He said excellence was the only currency that mattered. He said we hired the best people, regardless of background. He said a lot of things." Marcus kept his voice steady. "The question is what you're going to do now that you know what he actually did." Victoria stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she closed her laptop and looked at Marcus with an expression he had never seen before. Not the dragon lady. Not the vulnerable woman from the bar. Something new. Something being forged in the fire of a truth she could no longer avoid. "I need time to think. But Marcus, I want you to know something. Whatever I decide, I'm grateful you showed me this instead of taking it to the press or a lawyer. You could have destroyed me. You chose to give me a chance to make it right. That's what second chances are for. Not to pretend the past didn't happen, to choose a different future." 2 weeks later, Victoria called an all-hands meeting that the company would discuss for years afterward. She stood before her employees and delivered the hardest speech of her career, acknowledging the patterns her father had established and that she had unknowingly perpetuated. She announced an independent audit of all hiring and promotion decisions, a $2 million compensation fund for affected former employees, the creation of an equity and inclusion board with actual authority to implement changes. James Carter received a formal apology and a settlement of $175,000, along with an offer of reinstatement that he politely declined. Some doors, once closed, were better left that way. But he shook Victoria's hand at the signing and told her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to do right when doing nothing would have been easier. The news coverage was intense for 3 weeks and then faded as news coverage always does. What remained was harder to measure but more important. 12 former employees accepted invitations to return. Diversity in senior positions increased from 18% to 34% within 6 months. Richard Townsend, impressed by the transparency, increased his contract again to $8.1 million. Lily's science fair project on orbital mechanics earned second place. She was disappointed for approximately 4 minutes before launching into an analysis of what she would do differently next year. Her teacher pulled Marcus aside afterward and mentioned that Lily had been telling everyone about her daddy's important work and the nice lady who brings him coffee now. The nice lady in question had become a regular presence in their lives in ways Marcus had not anticipated. Victoria showed up at the apartment with her mother's chicken soup recipe when Lily caught a cold. She sat in the audience at the winter choir concert, applauding louder than any parent. She helped Marcus navigate the publishing process when an editor expressed interest in Starlight Lily, using connections she had never leveraged for anything except client acquisition. On the 1-year anniversary of that Friday night phone call, Victoria invited Marcus and Lily to her apartment for dinner. The penthouse looked different now. Photographs on the walls, Lily's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator alongside the picture of Victoria's mother. The sterile showroom had become something that resembled a home. After Lily fell asleep on the couch, full of lasagna made from a recipe 3 generations old, Victoria handed Marcus a small wrapped package. Inside was a first edition of the book his father had read to him as a child, the one he had mentioned once in passing months ago. The inscription in Victoria's elegant handwriting read, "To Marcus and Lily. Some people save others without realizing they are saving themselves in the process. Thank you for the second chance I didn't know I needed." Below the inscription sat a small velvet box. "I'm not very good at this." Victoria's voice carried a tremor Marcus had heard only once before, on a night when she had nothing left to lose. "I've spent my whole life believing vulnerability was weakness, that needing people was a flaw to be corrected. But watching you with Lily, seeing how your love for her makes you stronger instead of weaker, it changed everything I thought I understood about strength." She opened the box to reveal a simple ring. "I'm asking if there might be room in your family for someone who is still learning how to be part of one." Marcus looked at the ring, then at Victoria, then at the photograph of Emily that now sat on Victoria's bookshelf alongside her mother's picture. 2 women who had shaped the people they left behind in ways that still echoed through every choice and every chance. Lily appeared in the doorway, not asleep after all. "So is that a yes, Daddy? Because I already told my class you were getting married, and I don't want to be wrong." Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him with its fullness. He pulled Victoria close with one arm and beckoned Lily with the other, until all 3 of them stood together in a moment that felt like the beginning of something none of them had dared to imagine. "There has always been room for you. We were just waiting for you to find your way home." 1 year later, Marcus Cole stood in the back of a bookstore watching his daughter read aloud from Starlight Lily to a crowd of children and parents who had no idea that the lost star in the story had been inspired by a real woman who had learned to shine again. Victoria sat in the front row, photographing everything, already planning the celebration dinner. The call that changed everything had come at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night. Marcus Cole had every reason to ignore it. But kindness given without expectation of return has a way of finding its way back, transformed into something greater than either the giver or the receiver could have imagined alone. Some doors only open from the inside, but sometimes all it takes is someone willing to knock.